The last time anyone in Nazareth saw Jesus before his public ministry, he wasn't standing before crowds or performing miracles. He was carrying a rough wooden beam through a dusty street, helping an elderly widow repair the roof of her tiny home. No one applauded. No one realized they were watching the Son of God. To them, he was simply Mary's son, the quiet carpenter who always seemed to appear whenever someone needed help. But what happened during those hidden years? What did Mary witness while raising the child the world would one day call the Messiah? The scriptures tell us surprisingly little. Yet those silent decades became the foundation for everything that followed. And if you listen closely, the ordinary moments may reveal the most extraordinary story of all. After the terrifying night, when the family fled to Egypt to escape King Herod's decree, life slowly began to settle. The danger that had once surrounded the infant Jesus seemed distant. When news finally reached Joseph that Herod had died, he gathered his small family and began the long journey home. They did not return to Bethlehem. Instead, they settled once again in the quiet village of Nazareth, far from the grand cities and the powerful rulers who had once sought the child's life. Nazareth was not impressive. It was a small hillside village filled with farmers, craftsmen, shepherds, and families trying to survive from one season to the next. The roads were narrow. The homes were simple. Everyone knew everyone else's name. It was the kind of place where news traveled faster than the wind. Mary often wondered whether anyone still remembered the extraordinary night when angels appeared to shepherds, or the mysterious visitors from distant lands who brought gifts fit for a king. Here, life felt wonderfully ordinary, and perhaps that was exactly how God intended it. Joseph returned to his trade as a carpenter. Every morning before sunrise, the sound of his tools echoed through the small workshop beside their home. Wood filled the air with its familiar scent. The rhythm of sawing, carving, and sanding became part of everyday life. As Jesus grew older, he watched his earthly father carefully. Joseph was a patient teacher. He never rushed. He believed every piece of wood deserved respect because it came from God's creation. Before Jesus was old enough to hold a hammer, he learned something even more important. He learned how to listen. Joseph often reminded him, "A craftsman measures twice before cutting once." Years later, people would notice that Jesus listened far more than he spoke. Perhaps those quiet lessons began here. Mary watched her son grow in ways both familiar and mysterious. He laughed like other children. He played with friends in the dusty streets. He helped carry water from the village well. He chased birds from the family garden. He climbed rocky hills overlooking the valley. From the outside, nothing about his childhood appeared unusual. Yet there were moments Mary never forgot. Sometimes she would wake before dawn and discover Jesus sitting alone beneath the olive trees. He wasn't asleep. He wasn't playing. He simply sat in silence, watching the first light spread across the hills. When Mary asked what he was doing, he would smile gently. "I'm listening." "Listening to what?" she once asked. He looked toward the horizon before answering. "To my Father's world waking up." Mary treasured those words quietly within her heart. She remembered another time when Jesus was no more than 6 years old. A violent storm swept across Nazareth. Rain poured through damaged roofs. Strong winds scattered tools, baskets, and livestock throughout the village. The following morning, families walked outside to discover broken fences and fallen trees everywhere. Without anyone asking him, Jesus began helping. He carried pieces of lumber to elderly neighbors. He gathered scattered animals. He repaired damaged doors alongside Joseph. By sunset, Mary noticed something remarkable. Whenever Jesus finished helping one family, another person somehow appeared needing assistance. It was almost as though compassion itself was drawn toward him. Yet he never complained, never asked for recognition, never expected anything in return. Joseph smiled quietly as he watched. "He works with his hands," he told Mary, "but somehow he reaches people's hearts first." As the years passed, Jesus became known throughout Nazareth not because of miracles, but because of kindness. Travelers remembered his hospitality. Children remembered his patience. The elderly remembered his respect. Those who struggled remembered his willingness to stop whatever he was doing to help them. People trusted him, even before they understood why. There was one afternoon Mary often recalled with particular clarity. A young boy from the village accidentally broke an expensive clay jar belonging to a wealthy merchant. Terrified of punishment, the child ran home crying. The merchant demanded payment the boy's family could never afford. Before anyone else spoke, Jesus quietly stepped forward. He offered weeks of his own labor to replace the value of the broken jar. The merchant accepted. For nearly a month, Jesus worked after sunset repairing furniture and crafting wooden shelves without receiving any wages. When Mary asked why he accepted someone else's burden, his answer stayed with her forever. Sometimes people need mercy more than they need justice. Years later, those same words would echo through everything he taught. Still, life was not without hardship. Joseph grew older. Years of physical labor slowly weakened his body. His hands remained strong, but each season brought more pain than the one before. Jesus noticed long before anyone else. Without being asked, he quietly began taking on more responsibility inside the workshop. Customers soon realized that the young carpenter's work possessed extraordinary care. Tables stood perfectly level. Doors fit without resistance. Every chair was balanced. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was careless. Some customers specifically requested Jesus by name, not because he worked faster, because his work seemed filled with peace. One evening, after finishing a long day, Joseph placed his hand upon Jesus' shoulder. "I've taught you everything I know." Jesus smiled softly. "You taught me more than carpentry." Joseph looked confused. "You taught me how to serve." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Mary watched from the doorway. Something about that quiet conversation made her heart ache, almost as though she sensed time itself was gently changing. Then came the journey that would become one of Mary's most unforgettable memories. Jesus was 12 years old. As was their custom, the family traveled to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. The city overflowed with pilgrims. Thousands filled its streets. The temple stood magnificent above them, shining beneath the spring sunlight. For several days, everything unfolded normally. The celebrations ended. Families began traveling home together in large groups. Mary assumed Jesus was walking with relatives. Joseph believed he was traveling with friends. Only after an entire day's journey did they realize he wasn't with either group. Panic consumed them instantly. They hurried back toward Jerusalem, searching every crowded street, every marketplace, every lodging house. For 3 long days, they searched without finding him. Then they entered the temple once more, and what they saw stopped them in their tracks. Jesus was sitting quietly among the teachers, not arguing, not demanding attention, simply listening and asking questions. Yet every time he spoke, the scholars leaned closer. Some stroked their beards thoughtfully. Others exchanged astonished glances. One elderly teacher had stopped writing altogether. He simply stared at the 12-year-old boy seated before him. Mary rushed through the crowd. Relief and frustration crashed into each other all at once. "Son," she said, her voice trembling, "why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Jesus looked at her with calm eyes. Not rebellious, not defensive, just peaceful. "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" For a moment, Mary didn't know how to respond. She remembered another messenger, another promise, another impossible conversation years before. The angel's words echoed in her memory, "the Son of the Most High." She realized that even after 12 years, she was still learning who her own son truly was. Yet, something remarkable happened next. Jesus stood, walked back to his parents, and quietly returned home with them. The scriptures tell us something beautiful in that moment. He was obedient to them. The one through whom the universe had been created chose to honor his earthly mother and father. Back in Nazareth, life returned to its familiar rhythm. If anyone expected dramatic signs after the temple, they would have been disappointed. Jesus didn't gather followers. He didn't announce himself. He didn't seek recognition. Instead, he returned to the workshop. He carried lumber. He repaired broken furniture. He greeted neighbors with kindness. He continued living an ordinary life. Those hidden years often puzzle people. Why would the Savior of the world wait so long? Why remain unnoticed? Perhaps because God was showing something the world rarely understands. Greatness is often formed in quiet places. Character is built long before it is revealed. Every day, Mary watched her son choose humility. No applause, no crowds, no miracles that amazed the village. Only faithful obedience in small things. As Jesus entered his late teenage years, Joseph's health declined more rapidly. The strong carpenter, who had once carried heavy beams across his shoulders, now paused to catch his breath after simple tasks. Mary saw the concern in Jesus' eyes. Without complaint, he assumed more of the family's responsibilities. He became the primary craftsman in the workshop. Before sunrise, he prepared the tools. Throughout the day, he worked with steady hands. After sunset, he delivered finished furniture to customers across the village. Some evenings, he returned home long after darkness had fallen, not because he worked slowly, but because he often stopped along the way to help someone else, an elderly widow struggling with firewood, a shepherd repairing a broken gate, a family whose roof leaked after heavy rain. Jesus never seemed too busy to serve. People noticed. One neighbor later said, "When he entered your home, somehow you felt lighter when he left." No one could explain it. His words were gentle, his presence peaceful, his kindness unforgettable. Then came one of the hardest seasons Mary's family would ever face. Joseph died. The Bible doesn't describe the moment. It simply disappears from the story. But his absence speaks loudly. After the visit to the temple, Joseph is never mentioned again during Jesus' adult ministry. Most historians believe he passed away sometime before Jesus began preaching. For Mary, the loss was devastating. Joseph had protected their family from danger. He had led them through Egypt. He had taught Jesus a trade. He had loved them faithfully. Now he was gone. The workshop suddenly felt different. His tools remained where he had left them. The scent of cedar still filled the room, but the familiar sound of his voice had vanished. Mary wondered how they would survive. Jesus quietly stepped into his Father's place, not to replace Joseph. No one could, but to continue caring for the family he loved. He worked harder than ever. Every coin he earned helped feed his mother, helped provide for his younger brothers and sisters, helped keep the household together. For years, the Son of God lived the life of an ordinary working man. His hands became rough from labor, his shoulders strong from carrying timber. His clothes smelled of fresh-cut wood. The people of Nazareth simply called him the carpenter. Few titles could have sounded more ordinary. Yet perhaps none was more beautiful, because every chair he built, every table he repaired, every door he hung, was an act of love. Mary often noticed something unusual. Whenever someone entered the workshop angry, they usually left calmer. Not because Jesus argued with them, because he listened. He gave people his full attention. In a world where everyone hurried, he never seemed rushed. Children wandered into the workshop just to watch him work. He welcomed them. The poor often came asking if he could repair broken furniture they couldn't afford to replace. Many times, he accepted little or no payment at all. Mary occasionally worried, "If you keep giving your work away, how will we provide for the family?" Jesus would smile. "My Father has always provided." And somehow, they always had enough. Years passed quietly. The seasons changed. Harvests came and went. Children in the village grew into adults. Some married, some moved away. Empires rose and governors changed. Through it all, Jesus remained in Nazareth, waiting, preparing. No one knew why. Until one afternoon, when he returned home from the Jordan River, Mary immediately sensed something had changed. There was a quiet determination in his eyes she had never seen before. He embraced her longer than usual. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. Some moments speak louder than words. Finally, Jesus looked at his mother and said softly, "The time has come." Mary's heart tightened, because deep inside, she knew exactly what he meant. Mary stood silently in the doorway long after Jesus finished speaking. The room felt strangely still. Outside, life in Nazareth continued as it always had. Children laughed in the streets. A shepherd called to his flock. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer struck wood inside another workshop. Everything looked the same, yet nothing would ever be the same again. Mary looked at her son. She remembered the infant she had wrapped in swaddling cloths, the child who had learned to walk while holding Joseph's hand, the boy who had asked questions in the temple that left teachers speechless, the young carpenter whose kindness had quietly changed countless lives without anyone realizing it. Now the time had come for him to leave home. She wanted to ask him to stay just a little longer. One more season, one more Passover, one more evening around the family table. But she knew she could not. Some callings are too great to delay. The next morning, before sunrise, Jesus stepped into the workshop one last time. The tools were exactly where he had left them the evening before. He slowly ran his hand across Joseph's old workbench. Every mark in the wood held a memory. Tiny cuts from years of carving, dark stains from oil and cedar dust. The place where Joseph had first shown him how to shape rough timber into something useful. For several quiet moments, Jesus simply stood there. Then he picked up Joseph's hammer. He held it gently, almost reverently. Mary watched from the doorway. She could see tears forming in his eyes, not tears of fear, but gratitude. He carefully placed the hammer back on the bench exactly where it belonged. Without another word, he walked outside. Neighbors waved as he passed. Most assumed he was leaving for another construction job in a nearby village. None of them imagined that within months people across the region would be speaking his name. As Jesus walked toward the Jordan River to be baptized by John, Mary remained behind. She prayed, not for safety, She remembered Simeon's words spoken decades earlier in the temple. "A sword will pierce your own soul too." She had never fully understood those words. Now, she began to. News traveled quickly after Jesus left. Travelers passing through Nazareth brought remarkable stories. They spoke of a prophet beside the Jordan. They spoke of a voice from heaven. They spoke of a dove descending. Then came reports that Jesus had disappeared into the wilderness for 40 days. Some wondered whether he had become another wandering teacher. Others assumed he would eventually return to carpentry. Mary listened quietly. She trusted God's timing. Weeks later, another traveler arrived with astonishing news. "There was a wedding in Cana," he said. "The hosts ran out of wine." People laughed at the embarrassing mistake. Then the traveler lowered his voice. "They say water became wine." The room fell silent. Mary smiled softly. She remembered that wedding. She remembered quietly telling the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." She had not demanded a miracle. She simply trusted her son. That was enough. From that day forward, the hidden years were over. The carpenter became the teacher. The quiet servant of Nazareth became the shepherd of Israel. Crowds followed him. The sick sought him. The blind received sight. The broken found hope. Those who had watched him repair tables and doors now watched him restore hearts and lives. Yet despite everything that changed, Mary noticed something else. Jesus himself had not changed. He still stopped for children. He still noticed the lonely. He still listened before speaking. He still served before asking to be served. The compassion that amazed crowds had been growing quietly in Nazareth for 30 years. The patience that astonished his disciples had been practiced in Joseph's workshop. The humility that confused religious leaders had been learned through ordinary labor. Nothing about those hidden years had been wasted. Every unseen act of obedience prepared him for every public act of ministry. When people marveled at his wisdom, Mary remembered the little boy who loved to sit quietly beneath the olive trees. When they admired his gentleness, she remembered the young carpenter who worked for weeks to repay a broken jar that wasn't even his responsibility. When they witnessed his power, she remembered Bing, the child who rose before dawn simply to listen to his father's creation awaken. And when the crowds shouted his name, Mary remembered the countless days when no one noticed him at all. Perhaps that is why those silent years matter so much. The world often celebrates the extraordinary moments, but God also works through ordinary faithfulness. In quiet homes, simple workshops, hidden prayers, acts of kindness no one else ever sees.